Seconded. Thanks, Maurice. So moved by Bill, seconded by Maurice, that the agenda be approved as presented. Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest. We have any? Seeing none. We'll then move to the SNC Forestry project update, PowerPoint presentation by the staff.
Okay. And just for the committee, if you have questions, if you can please use the raise your hand function. We don't have video feeds of everyone up on our screen. So if you can just use the raise your hand function, that'll make sure that we don't miss you. Oops. Let me get these slides. And there are 2 slides that I've added. So for anyone that has the deck open that I emailed last night, these first 2 slides, my apologies, are not in that deck. So hopefully you can see them on the screen. And I'd like to introduce a new member to our team. So Kayla, if you're on, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, Seguziwakwego, Denanganat Diosta Yungat Satsmi. That's an introduction telling you my name. You guys can call me Kayla. I am excited to be here, kind of working with you guys on the healing place, getting that out to the public, and trying to kind of further its message and reach. So I don't know, 2 things that I wanted to kind of throw out there is that we've applied for some grants and funding to do some more workshops and bring some more good healing through the winter months in the name of the healing place. And once those kind of get confirmed and we have some social media, I'll be relying on you guys to kind of help get the word out. It'll be open to everybody and you don't have to be Indigenous to partake. And as you mentioned earlier, we also had the Healing Place Remembering the Children Day on October 14th. We had quite a few really awesome key players that did good speeches, shared information about their past, and talked a bit on residential schools, their experience there, and the steps that they hope to hear, see, or do through reconciliation. We had our children's garden, which was planted, and again, it is kind of cold and dark out there, but as you guys had mentioned, if you want to go out there and take a look, there is stuff to see. There's nice trees, and they're all planted, they're all looking good, and we also have like the whole sweetgrass garden. There's lots of things, and if you want help looking through the garden or understanding what's there, I can be of service. There is a live stream that you can access through the link on the bottom, and if there's anything that you want to see or any questions that you might have about the healing place for the future, feel free to send them to me.
Thanks, Kayla.
Thanks, Kayla.
Pat's going to go through some acquisition updates.
Good morning, everyone. Over the past year, we've added about 300 acres to the SNC forest land base, starting off with one acquisition that was about 12 months ago, late in December of 2020, acquisition of the Vellum tree farm in North Stormont. It was a 66-acre parcel. It was done under the ecological gift programs. One of 4 that the Vellumas have passed on to the authority. The current one was a mix of natural hardwoods and conifer plantations and included an extensive trail network. We're very fortunate to have received this. Next. One acquisition that had started a little while ago and was completed last year was the Mill Run Conservation Area. SNC is now SNC 169, 8.5 acre parcel along the shores of the South Nation River, upstream of the village of Spencerville. It was donated by the township to the authority. And is currently being developed as a river access park. In 2022, we plan on doing some planting there for pollinators, and that project is funded by the federal government. The picture is part of the shoreline there and shows a deciduous swamp near the South Nation River. In May of 2021, we acquired a 99 acre parcel in Alfred Plantagenet. It's part of a candidate provincially significant wetland, the Dickinson Creek Wetland Complex. Within that complex, there's about 1,600 acres in public ownership between South Nation Conservation and the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. So this is really a concentrated area of public ownership in what is a significant natural heritage feature. And finally, we recently acquired 175 acres in the Host Creek Wetland Complex. This is in South Dundas. Of course, this is a provincially significant wetland area. And the photograph is a well-stocked black ash forest on organic soils. This is probably one of the best examples of that type of forest in the area.
I think, Chris, you're up next.
There we go. Mine kept cutting out in my mic. Anyways, I just want to welcome everybody today. We had the opportunity to have some filming done on one of our properties. It was in regards to First Nations heritage. There was a conversation between Paul Allaire and Christian Pinot, and they were just talking about the cultures. And it happened on SNC 55, which is just east of Maxville at the Via Rail crossing. And I wasn't here at the time, I was off, but Pat made a visit to out there with him, and I guess it went very, very well.
On November 17th, we were fortunate to be part of an FSC audit, a field audit for both the SNC Forest and SD&G County Forest. It went very well. We visited 3 sites and toured recent operations, one that had just finished days before our visit, and some that had finished over the last winter. As I said, everything went very well. There were a few issues or concerns that were raised, and things we will expect a report early in the new year in January.
Good morning, members of the committee. So I'm just going to give you a quick update regarding the tree planting that we did this year. So I think it's been a while, but with my time at South Nation, we haven't done any fall tree planting. So we did one this year through the 2 billion tree planting program, that new federal tree planting program that just started out. And we planted on SNC 7, which is down in Brinston area, and on Halbert Road, sorry. We planted a mix of white pine, hemlock, red oak, and sugar maple. As you can see in the hands of Tavish, the size of the red oaks and the sugar maples are very, very nice. And they're all in little pots, so coconut husk pots, and we're looking forward to see how they will survive through the winter. Next slide. We also did help for the Community Environmental Grant Program, which is a program for our member municipalities to plant trees in their parks. Now, the information on this slide is not accurate from this year. This is actually data from last year, but we did plant 6 parks in Russell-Embrun for a total of 30 caliper-sized trees. The picture that you see there, it's Manotick tree movers that are planting a basswood at Richelieu Park in Embrun. So 6 parks in Russell-Embrun were done for a total of 30 trees, and Nation and Castleman also participated with that program, and they did plant 3 trees each. Although we did not help to plant the trees or supervise the plantation, they were able to benefit from the grant program. Next slide. So next spring 2022, is going to be a record once again. We're beating the 2021 record with a total amount at this time of 240,225 trees. So that's a lot of trees. And you can see the amounts that are reserved for each program below. Of course, the most popular program is the 50 million tree planting program. And we have over 40 landowners that were planting either abandoned fields or windbreaks through that program. So it's really exciting. And we have reserved the trees for next year with the help of 3, maybe even 4 nurseries. So we're looking forward to another really big year next spring.
Good morning, everybody. The Forestry team was able to visit 70 tree planting projects this fall. These were tree planting projects through the years 2017, 2020, and 2021. Overall percentage of survival was 62% out of 207,000 trees, which is really good. So both the pictures you see is maintained trees and not maintained trees. So the one on the right is looking down the rows, the exact same kind of style of picture, but that grass is about 6 feet tall. So those trees did not do very well. So we kind of like to tell people to kind of take care of them. And that's good. That's it for my slide. Thank you.
Good morning. This is just an update of the hazard tree removal. This is a continual thing at all of our conservation areas as an as-need basis. And where feasible, we've been able to salvage some of the fuel wood off the property. So this is a picture of ash salvaged by SNC staff at the Robert Graham Conservation Area. So there was approximately 70 trees that were removed off the site there. And tree replacement is set to occur in our landscape areas where we do have a lot of trees being removed as a result of the emerald ash borer. So this is just an example of some of the stuff that we would regularly contract out. Here is a picture of contractors removing the dead elm at Oak Valley Pioneer Park. So there's hazard trees addressed by SNC staff. And we had a contractor come in to remove a couple dead elm. And there was also a section of the trail where there was an abundance of white pine that had been succumbing to blister rust and weevil damage. So we removed that within the landscaped areas.
Bill has a question.
Bill, you have a question?
Yes, Philip, in the second last slide, you indicated there's going to be tree replanting. What types and how large will they be?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that in my next slide, I believe, or one of the upcoming slides. Yep. So yeah, so here, following some of the larger cuts that we've had in some of our landscape parks, we've done replacement of large caliper sized trees. So the trees vary in range from 70 to 100 mils. So here's an example of some of the tree planting that we did at Cass Bridge. Earlier this year, there was approximately 32 ash trees removed off this site, and we replaced it with some caliper trees in the landscaped areas to fill in some of those holes. The park looks a lot better, and obviously the safety aspects have been addressed. So there was tree replacement at the following conservation areas. At Cass Bridge, there was 3 trees planted. St. Albert, we replaced 1 tree. Doran Park, there were 3 trees planted there. And Lemieux Historic Site, we had 2 red oaks planted. The caliper trees are planted in the landscape areas to increase the forest cover and replace the trees that were lost. As well, forestry crews are out marking some of our plantation forests for operational thinning. So SNC 75 was completed in October. There was 10 hectares marked there. The tree marking is completed and the tender has been awarded. Currently, we're working on SDNG 9 and 10, which is just out here in North Stormont. It's approximately 25 hectares. It's ongoing. I'm currently completing my shelterwood tree marking audit there, and the understory is absolutely dominated by glossy buckthorn. So there'll be some silvicultural prescriptions required thereafter, the site tending afterwards. And as well, just an update of some of the trail improvements that we finished up on this year. So trail upgrades to Robert Graham Conservation Area. It was resurfacing of approximately 350 meters of the trail. We did some trail widening and hazard tree removal there. At Oshman Forest, we installed 2 new culverts, which are wider to facilitate winter grooming and our forestry operations and our harvest that will be occurring there in January. As well, at W.E. Burton, we resurfaced 120 meters of trail, and Nokomis Park, another 75 meters of trail.
Any questions of Phil? Phil, I have a question. You mentioned the hazard tree removal at Robert Graham and salvage trees, and said where feasible, fuel wood is salvaged and sold. How is it sold? Is it how is it advertised, or?
What we do is we call a couple local contractors that have logging trucks that would be able to move that. Being that we had to haul the wood out to the parking lot, we couldn't have it sitting there for a long time. Once we accumulated the pile of wood, we went through our purchasing policy and just obtained 3 quotes, and whichever was the highest bidder was able to take the wood.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Dorothy.
Dorothy?
Yeah, it goes back to the tree planting. I waited till we were done here. On November 15th, D&G Council was presented with the Natural Heritage Systems update, and they moved ahead with adopting it and putting it into the plan or down the road incorporated plan. One thing came Councilor Boyville was concerned about the amount of windrows that were coming down in his area. And I understand that there's going to be quite a bit of windrow replanting. Is that correct?
Replanting per se, some. It's often new windbreaks that are being established in fields that haven't had any vegetation. We're not proactive in contacting landowners to ask if they do want their windbreaks replanted following, ash, emerald ash borer, anything like that. It's something that I wish we could do if we had time, but at this point, just the amount of landowners that reach out to us to have trees planted on their property is immense. So we don't have time, unfortunately, to go door on door and ask people if they do want their windbreaks replanted.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, no, I just wondered if a landowner were coming to you for planting, or any of you landowners specifically after that.
It's cutting off a little bit, but we do have landowners that contact us to have windbreaks planted. Yes, for sure.
It would be the requirement for the 50 million tree program, Dorothy, whether or not they have a large enough area to qualify. They may only qualify for over-the-counter subsidy, just depending on the size of their windbreak.
Yeah, it goes way back when we had the forest groups meeting to discuss forest cover, and that was one of the things that actually came up about getting trees back out on the land for areas that didn't quite qualify for the tree planting program. So just sort of going back to that one again.
And I did neglect to put a slide in to update. I forgot, but just on the forest cover, we are in the process of acquiring LiDAR in Eastern Ontario. So if the weather would cooperate and snow would stay away for a little bit longer, there are planes in the sky on nice days. So we do have 14,500 kilometers square in Eastern Ontario that will have new LiDAR. hopefully by the end of next year at the latest. So once we have that LiDAR data, we'll be in a position to take a look again at our forest cover and update the forest cover layer. We're just waiting for that newest set of data.
Rhonda, does the municipalities have access to that LiDAR?
They will. So the partnership is actually huge. So there are 6 conservation authorities, including ourselves, 7 upper tier counties and 4 tier municipalities that are participating. So we're basically going from Frontenac east to the Quebec border. Where and then it's adding to, we'll have LiDAR coverage hopefully by the end of next year
Thank you.
at the latest. This is the end of our update.
Okay.
There are additional questions?
Thanks, staff, for those updates. Any additional questions? Meeting. So, 7. Are there any errors or corrections?
It's Bill. I'm only hearing part of what you're saying, Mr. Chair. You're breaking up from my point of view.
The speaker.
Yeah, it should be picking up.
Should be picking up. I was just asking for the approval of the Forestry Committee meeting minutes of September the 7th. And that's on page 3 and 7. 3 to 7. Do I have a mover and seconder? Is that Bruce?
That's Maurice.
Bruce and Bill. Thank you very much. All. Any opposed? Thank you. Justice arising from the minutes. Okay.
I have none unless there are any questions pertaining to the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay. Any questions pertaining to the minutes of the last meeting? Seeing none. Move to new business. Update Conservation Authorities Act, and that would be Angela.
Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? I know, as if everyone can answer it. It was really nice to sit through the slideshow as staff provided their presentations and updates. Not everything can get onto the board of directors agenda, so it is nice to have an update from staff and to hear about all of the work and efforts that have been completed in the parks and in the tree planting. So before I give my presentation, I want to thank staff for that presentation and also to thank them for all their hard work as we continue to experience very big years of tree planting, bigger years than we've ever had, and sometimes supply issues, and sometimes contractor issues, and sometimes personnel issues to be able to do all that work. So I think that they're doing an excellent job, and I want to thank them for that. It's also encouraging to see the amount of land being added to the forest cover and conservation land base. And there's some very exciting partnerships with Ducks Unlimited and others that are assisting in the acquisition to support the levies that the municipalities give us, but also allowing us to leverage a nice amount of federal and other partner contribution dollars. So I want to send a shout out to the team that's working on those land acquisitions and negotiations as well. The purpose of my visit this morning is simply to provide a brief overview on updates to the Conservation Authorities Act to keep everyone up to date. And I apologize if I did get a chance to see you yesterday at Clean Water, and then further, I suppose, if you see me again tonight at Fish and Wildlife. But as you know, South Asian Conservation has a number of citizens committees, and I do think that those committees are very important to set appropriate organizational goals and have as much community feedback and buy-in. That doesn't always mean that everybody will agree all the time, but I think overall, and in all my years of working with the authority, I've certainly appreciated all of the feedback and discussions I've been able to have with committee members. So I feel do a tremendous job in our communities working together for our collective environmental goals. Next slide, please. Basically, for those of you that have had presentations from me before, just simply to say that a number of changes to the Conservation Authorities Act have been made really through the time period about 2017 through now. Next slide, please. Those changes have accumulated in a bill passage called Bill 229 that came into force in February of 2021. Next slide, please. The main changes that are included in the Conservation Authorities Act changes include changes to municipal appointments. Many of our council members are acting or sitting elected municipal officials, but we do have some citizen appointments as well. Currently, we don't have an immediate action required as all members are allowed to fulfill the terms of their the current terms of their mandate with the Conservation Authority. However, in some cases where a municipality wishes to appoint a citizen appointment, they would either need to do that only if they've met a 70% municipal appointment requirement or have asked for a special permission from the minister. Next slide, please. Um, Basically, the new appointments that will happen next year, so that will be after the municipal election in the fall of 2022, we'll just have to make sure that we meet that 70% requirement of elected officials on the board, or we would have to ask, or the municipality rather, not the Conservation Authority, it's actually the municipality making the appointment that must provide a letter to the minister to seek permission if they wanted to have a different type of arrangement or a public representative on the board. Next slide, please. The board composition is also something that some municipalities in the province felt there wasn't enough openness and transparency about. So a copy of an order in council was made and presented to not only on our website, but provided to the governor's office. Basically, all that shows is that we've changed the apportionment on municipal appointments. And over time, that's of course happened because of a number of municipal amalgamations, where at one time we might have had something like a 23 or 24 member board of directors. It's now a significantly lower number because of amalgamations and other weighted voting requirements. Next slide. The chair and vice chair are now also requested to serve one-year terms and cannot serve more than 2 consecutive terms. However, that is also something that the minister can make an exception for. So simply put, our current bylaws are consistent with that requirement to change that up. But if we wanted to request an exception to that, we could do that by the minister. But as you know, anyone who's watched the board composition is we tend to rotate those chairs between City of Ottawa, Prescott Russell, SDG, and Leeds Grenville. So we tend to rotate between the upper tiers. Next slide, please. There's also provision now under the Act that the minister can appoint a member of the agricultural sector with limited voting abilities. So the appointment of the agricultural rep is something that the minister has to do, and it's at the minister's discretion. But also noting that that member, because they're not an elected official and not directly tied to the levy requirement, would not have a voting right with respect to the levy and the apportionment allocations. So we'll look to see if they do, if the minister does do that, and I hope that the minister certainly respects existing types of committee structures, arrangements, and processes that the local federations of agriculture would have in place when they make those types of decisions to make those appointments, should they do so. Next slide, please. We must follow generally accepted accounting principles for local governments, and we do that. So that was not a change that was extensive for us. Next slide, please. Public documents such as meeting agendas, meeting minutes, and auditor reports must be on the website, and those documents are currently available on our website. Next slide, please. Staff must have permission or consent to enter onto land for the purposes of Conservation Authority projects. And of course, for us, no action was required. If we're going out and doing any type of surveying, collecting any data, we always sought prior landowner approval. One thing that is of interest, though, is that the Conservation Authority's power to expropriate land is actually repealed under the Act. So it's clear now that a Conservation Authority has no power to expropriate land. That is of good note to South Nation conservation, because we, always had concerns about Castleman Tullamew and the potential retrogressive landslide area there. And it is now clear in the Act that we have no power to expropriate in that area. And I think that, that's actually a good change for us. Next slide, please. And basically all that to say, there is a discussion paper that happened earlier in the year. We've sort of been, this says on here, draft regulations have not been released. This should be updated, this particular point. The draft regulations were released on October the 12th, just around Thanksgiving. So we're working with those draft regulations right now to prepare what's called a transition plan. That was approved by our board last month and will be submitted to the ministry before the year end. And then we're working on, next slide, please, presentations to our board of directors each month, which we started in about May of this year, to do an overview of programs and services that we offer, to assist with what will be called a program inventory. What I will talk to this committee about is certainly to note that while a lot of the work with respect to natural hazards such as floodplains and unstable slopes and our dams and dikes and water control infrastructure, as well as the conservation lands, have all been deemed things that are mandatory programs, we'll have to have a better and more fulsome discussion around some of our stewardship and outreach programs and figure out the consequences, if any, of the current categories of mandatory programs and services. So that is something that will happen at the board table starting in December, and certainly may require your support throughout the consultation period up and until February, whenever we submit the list of mandatory programs and services for the Conservation Authority. Next slide. This is just talking about the municipal levy and how it works, and just to let you know that we're currently in budget and budget negotiations. Our budget has been circulated to member municipalities and will be brought back to the board for final approval in January of 2022. And with that, last slide. We're overall very satisfied with where the mandatory programs regulation has landed from the changes from the government. Of course, it would be easier to run programs in the way we've been doing it, with consensus and discussion over a number of years, but certainly glad to know that the activities on the lands, the conservation lands, and all those areas are properly within the municipal levy, and that there's no challenges to implementing most of the programs and services we've been implementing over many years. So with that, I welcome any questions, and again, apologize if it is a repeat and hopefully not a tripartite repeat, a triptych repeat for some. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any questions of Angela? Bill?
Not a question, but a comment. My observation is that for the past number of years, we've had diligent and knowledgeable leadership at South Nation. And although there will be some changes, there aren't very many. And we've been doing a heck of a lot of things the way the expectations are set, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Murray?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I gather, though there's no reference in the material, that MNRF is now totally out of the picture, and conservation and environment has taken over all those responsibilities.
MNRF is still basically keeping the entire natural hazard piece, Murray.
Natural
Yeah, natural hazards. So they're keeping the floodplain type of regulation piece. So they're really keeping the part of our work that deals with keeping development and you know, to the extent that it was already shared with municipal affairs and housing, they are really still keeping the flood piece, because I think also they seem more tied in with the emergency response folks as well at Emergency Response Ontario. So there's a lot of coordination. So while there's a number of ministries, we have seen in our work still ministers of the emergency minister group, the municipal affairs and housing group, as well as the MNRF. And that is like they have a new acronym that's actually longer than that, as well as the MECP. So it does seem to still have some overlap in it, especially in that monies for water and erosion control infrastructure still lie and are coming out of the Ministry of Natural Resources as well. So that piece is staying there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dorothy, did you have a question, comment? Angela, a couple of things in your presentation. You mentioned provincial appointments or approval appointments to the board. How long do you think it's going to take for the province to make those appointments?
So basically the normal appointments, that would be a normal appointment is what I'm calling when a municipality or a county appoints what is a sitting politician. Those will just be as they are. Those are de facto appointments. The only appointments where you're going to require an approval are those ones that are anomalies or exceptions to what the minister has tabled.
Well,
So,
that's-
and in short, that is, so where you're seeking an approval to have a citizen appointee in lieu of an elected politician, and second, where you're seeking an extension of the term of chair from a period of 1 year to 2.
that was my concern with the appointments, non-politician appointments, and the time it might take for the province to approve those appointments. I know in some cases, boards that I've been involved with, that the provincial may take 3 to 6 months to approve. Do you anticipate that with the Conservation Authority?
Well, I mean, we'll have to have an interim measure, I think, if that's the case.
Okay. The other question I had was access to land, and must have the landowner's permission to go on. What if it's a case of enforcement?
So a quick way to answer that is even with enforcement, if you want any evidence collected to be any good in court, you'd still need to have, you know, you generally still need to have that consent to go on and collect and read rights, etc. So it's only going to be in the most extreme of circumstances that we would have ever gone on anyways. And so you do still have that power vested in the enforcement piece, that if you have to go on for something that's a matter of, you know, extreme risk to life or property, you still have the provision to enter on for regulations like for enforcement of a regulations issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions of Angela? If not, we thank you. Angela?
Thank you.
The next, we have an update, Forest Administration and Operations. And that's page 8 and 9 on your agenda. We have,
Should be Pat.
back to you, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report is on page 8 and 9. I did bring a report on the S&C forest back in September, so I just took that and added to it. The items in italics are new to that update. We did acquire 2 new properties, as mentioned, since September, as mentioned in the slideshow. In terms of forest certification, one thing I hadn't mentioned in September was our participation in the adoption of the reporting, pesticide reporting under new standards under the Forest Stewardship Council. And we did that in August. We did have an ongoing project that was using pesticides in the forest to control buckthorn. We were able to participate in developing the reporting documents. Also to that, we had our, as mentioned in the slideshow, we had our external audits on both forests. In terms of forest operations, we completed a thinning in one of the forest compartments this fall, SNC 29 in North Glengarry. And we did successfully tender SNC 75 this year. And as Carol had reported, we completed the fall tree planting on SNC 7. In terms of the SD&G County Forest, I hadn't updated the committee on that, so you'll notice that most of the bullet points are in italics. Under Forest Administration, after much delay due to COVID-19 restrictions for getting into council, we were able to present the annual report in person to the county council in October. We've also added 100 acres to the county forest with some recent acquisitions. And we do have some other acquisitions that are currently in progress, approximately 200 acres consisting of 3 different parcels throughout the county. In terms of forest certification, we did, as we did for the SNC forest, submit all the reporting documents. We submitted the high conservation values report. We attended the both the internal and external FSC audits. In terms of forest operations, we completed harvest on SDG 11, 12, 13, which is part of the Warwick Forest in early winter this year. And we completed a harvest in a spruce plantation on SDG 90, which is north of Dalkeith. We completed a well decommissioning on SDG 75, which is in South Stormont, and we have some site preparation on SDG 20 and 21, which is in North Stormont, east of Gravel Hill. That's currently in progress, and as Phil had mentioned, we have some tree marking going on in the Warwick Forest in North Stormont. And that's basically an update on what's been happening in the forest.
Yes, we do. So it is a receive and file.
Yes.
Are there any questions of Pat's presentation? Murray?
Yes, Pat. This isn't directly on your report, but some years ago, we did a test planting of Carolinian type trees as an experiment in anticipation of climate change. Do you have anything to report on that for us?
Over a year ago, we did some, it's a planting that was done up in Alfred Plantagenet. It looked at several species of oak and some others, which I don't recall. We've been tending that over the years, and we did a survival assessment about 2 years ago. I can look at the details of that and bring something back in terms of the survival and on that at our next meeting.
Thank you very much.
We have no further questions. I need a mover and a seconder for the Forestry Committee receive and file the update on SNC and SDG forest operations.
I had Dorothy and then Doug.
Dorothy moved. Doug
Yes.
seconded. Any opposed? Seeing none, hearing none, approved. Next is the update for certification audits, and that's back to you, Pat.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. This is just an update on what's happened under the forest certification audits. Basically, under the internal audits, we did have two of them. We were fortunate in having two internal audits. Early in the January, February, Jim Hendry was the coordinator of the program at that point and did an internal audit and found everything to be compliant with the FSC standards. Since that time, a new auditor has come on board, Glenn Prevost. He's with the Ontario Woodlot Association. And just to get familiar with the forest, he did a second internal audit in August. It was an opportunity for staff to meet the new coordinator. We visited a number of sites that were scheduled to be in the external audit, and Glenn again found those operations to be compliant with the FSC standards. And then, as I reported earlier, we did receive the field audits from FSC for both forests on November 17th, and we got a chance to once again to meet with the group coordinator and met the FSC auditor on site. There were no issues expressed at the time of the audit, but as I mentioned earlier in the slideshow, the official report will be available in January, and we're anticipating a positive result. If there are any questions over that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Seeing none, I'd ask for the Forestry Committee receive and file the update on forest certification. Need a mover and a seconder. Murray and Dorothy. Thank you. Opposed, if any? Seeing and hearing none, it's approved. Next is the request for approval, Ottawa Ash Replacement Program, Rhonda.
Thank you,
11 and 12.
Mr. Chair. So page 11 of your agenda. So again, at the last meeting of each year, we do bring a report summarizing the grants that we have approved to date for the Ottawa Ash Tree Replacement Program. The program again provides funding to residents in the city of Ottawa to remove infected ash trees and replace them with native trees. This program has been running since its launch in 2018 and is usually oversubscribed by mid-October of each year. This year, though, we are finding it's a little bit slower with applications, so they still continue to come in. I'm not sure if it's reflective of the current pandemic situation or not, but we do still have a little bit of funding left, but applications continue to come in and we process them as they do. Again, the projects are approved up until June of the following year to give landowners an opportunity to replant in the spring, especially if they're applying now. It's not great for planting and it's really difficult to find stock. So this allows them the opportunity to go ahead with the removal this fall with their company and then wait until spring to replant. So we do require approval to carry forward their approved dollars for payout in 2022 when they've completed their project. So the grant does offer up to $500 per tree, up to $5,000 per applicant. And just a reminder that the removal has to be completed by a professional, either a certified arborist or a professional forester, of which most of the companies that are doing tree removals in Ottawa have one or the other. That individual will also certify for us on the application form that it is an ash tree that has been infected. That saves us having to go out and verify ourselves because they are a certified professional. So as of the date of the report, there were 63 applications that were approved for about 136,000 in grants, removing about 377 infected ash, and again, replacing them one for one with a native tree. We're continuing to process grants, and we have about 42,500 still remaining in the program. And again, most of the projects that we're approving now and that we approved late in the summer will be completed in spring of next year. And I did attach a summary on page 12 for you, just to give you an idea of the number of trees and the number of grants. I have to say there's no real average here. It really depends on the location of the trees, how many trees. So we don't really have an average cost that really shows well a typical cost for landowners. It's really dependent on the individual properties. I do have an application pending that's about 80 trees in one single application, so that will certainly boost the numbers. Our applicant is just waiting for a quote for the replacement trees. So we do anticipate allocating the funding. It's just taking a little bit longer this year than what we've seen in the past. So looking for approval to carry over approximately 122,000 for payout of approved projects in 2022. Any surplus that results from projects that we've approved that comes in under their initial estimates, we do assign to the next eligible project on a waiting list, if we have it.
Any questions of Rhonda?
Doug.
Doug? Go ahead, Doug.
Just for clarification, what areas does South Nation coordinate this program? What portions of the city does South Nation coordinate the program?
We do coordinate for the entire city of Ottawa, so we are delivering on behalf of Rideau and Mississippi Valley conservation areas as well. So we do intake for all of the city through our office here.
Okay, thanks very much.
Anyone else? Seeing none. The recommendation is the Forestry Committee approves the carryover of approximately 122,000 Ottawa Ash Tree Replacement Program grant funding for the 2021 budget for payment to approved projects as they are completed. And further, that the committee approves reallocating any surplus funds from the approved projects to the next eligible project on the program waiting list. Need a mover and a seconder.
And just a clarification, it's carried forward to the 2022 budget. Apologies, that is a typo.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, you read it right. I wrote it wrong.
Oh,
It
okay.
should be the 2022 budget.
Okay. Mover is
Maurice.
Maurice. Seconder. Doug, thanks very much. Opposed, if any? Seeing and hearing none, approved. Thank you. Item E, request for approval 2022 Forestry Committee 2022 meeting schedule. Rhonda, page 13 of your agenda.
Thank you. Again, at the last meeting of the year, we do try to set our dates for the following year. This also helps us plan ahead, get the dates into your calendars, and we do provide the dates also to our board of directors at their December meetings. So following the same meeting schedule that we have for the last several years, you'll see the proposed dates for 2022. The March 3rd, just a note, that is a Thursday. So again, we are scheduling the forestry at the same time as the joint standing committee meeting. So forestry at 10 a.m. and the joint meeting at 1 p.m. As with 2021, that joint meeting may be postponed depending on where we are as far as pandemic and what we can actually host. So we'd like to set the date, although closer to March 1st, we may make a change to the scheduling of that joint meeting. if we're not able to accommodate it. So again, we prefer to do that one in person. Don't think it's going to happen for March. We'll need to reassess if we want to try an online version of that or not. So we'll confirm closer to March 3rd if that joint meeting will happen. June 7th, June 6th, and November 29th follows the same schedule that we had this year. So unless there are any dates that stick out for anyone as not being great, those are what we're proposing for 2022.
Do we see any conflicts that we might have? I know it's early in the year. Seeing none, the recommendation is the Forestry Committee approve the Forestry Committee meeting 2022 schedule as presented. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Bill, seconded by Doug. Thank you very much. Opposed of any? Seeing and hearing none, approved. Thank you. Supplemental agenda, we have none this meeting.
Nope.
Correspondence.
I also had none to include in the package, so we can move on to the next item.
Roundtable discussions, community engagement. Have we, Doug?
Yeah, I don't know if it's community engagement, but I wanted to check with Pat and Rhonda in regard to the South Nation property on Grays Creek Road. My understanding was that was going to be there was going to be work done on that to accommodate a walking or walking path or pathways on that. So I just wondering if there's any update on that particular project.
I don't have an, Mr. Chair, I do not have an update at this time. But certainly in the new year, I can visit the property and lay something out and look at the development of a project.
Yeah, okay, that would be great. And Pat, I'd be prepared to meet with you. That's in the that land is within the area of responsibility for the Greedy Community Association, and we're excited and or anxious to have something that we could develop, because it's fairly close to the village of Greeley, and it would be, I think, a worthwhile project to move forward.
Would you be available for a short walk while the weather is still not too bad, Doug?
Yes, as long as it's short. No,
Yeah.
no, I'm I'm available pretty well anytime, Pat.
Okay, I'll give you a call before weekend to
Okay.
set something up for next week.
That would be great. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Anyone else? Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil has already reported in the presentation section about the removal of the large and last of our native elms at Oak Valley Park. The group at the park is planning to put in some seedlings and perhaps some caliper trees next spring. Part of those will be Carolinian type trees, just to measure, anticipate what whether they'll survive in climate change conditions. So we're looking forward to doing some work, and which is partly why I asked Pat about the South Nation planting of Carolinian type trees. Thank you.
Bill? Bill?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It took me a minute to get my thing off mute. I wanted to report on a couple of things, Mr. Chair. The first one is I'm not sure that it's been mentioned, but the budget was the draft budget was tentatively approved at the November meeting of the board. And it's a very extensive document, around 90 plus pages. And the reason I mention it is always before we had been very thorough, and there's representation from this area from councils, plus people like myself who report to their council regularly. And so we had always approved the budget in November or at the latest December for the following year over the past number of years. But because of the changes and because of the requirements and because of wanting to make sure that we're following the rules carefully, this year the draft budget was approved to be circulated to municipalities and to others, and there are 16 municipalities, and looking for input from those groups so that this can be sent back and discussed, and the budget will come back for approval at the January 22 meeting this year. So that's a slight change, and it is following through with some of the suggestions made. I'm not sure if there'll be many suggestions coming because our representatives are pretty thorough in what they check and how they report back. So just for information though, that tentative budget information, I believe it's now on the website, and you people may be interested in looking particularly at, well, all of the dollars included, but about 60% of the budget is from dollars that come from municipalities. About 40% is found by the due diligence of staff members researching and finding grants that can be gotten, and we get about 40% of our dollars from outside agencies or other agencies that sure supplements the budget here and helps all of our municipalities. So I think that's an important point to note. Also, you may want to notice page 8 if you go to the website, because this is the page that gives you the total amount each area pays and each municipality pays, and how what percentage that is of the total budget. So just for your information. Secondly, I want to comment that thank Angela for the update she gave and the thanks she gave to staff, because I also want to add my thanks to staff. I go to all of the board meetings, but I go to most of the committee meetings, and I am always very interested in the staff summary of what's been done and what's being done and what's important to be done. And I believe that that input for our committee and also for our board is very important for the decision making we do and how we follow through and how we understand what we're voting on. So I want to add my thanks to them as well. Thirdly, I want to mention that I do report regularly to my municipality, and I actually reported at the meeting last week and got them all copies of the current budget, told them what they needed to be doing and what they should check on, gave them a bit of an update on what Angela reported on, and specifically, since I'm a citizen appointee, what they would have to do in the future, either appoint from themselves or be in touch with the minister. So I'm keeping them up to date in that way. And and I mentioned, I presented the budget to North Dundas. They were extremely interested in it. One of the other things I do in my presentations is make sure I report on what's being done in North Dundas. We pay just under 100,000, and that's probably 2.5% of the total budget. But when we look at what happens and what we get, I report that each month so they know, or each time I report, so they know where their dollars are going, but what dollars are coming back to them, and what grants are gotten, and what work's being done at the Oshman Forest, and what work's being done on Highway 31 at the Cass Bridge Park, and the docks, and in Chesterville, and and at the dam in Chesterville. So I just think it's really important that we as representatives keep our people involved, whether we're board members or committee members. And thank you for listening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bill. Caroline, did you have comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Murray's question regarding Carolinian species. So we did plant in La Rose Forest, or on a La Rose Forest property. It was Steve Hunter's project. It was 6,000 trees total, and a portion of them was tulip trees, sycamore, swamp white oak, so more southern species. And we did do a survival assessment this fall, and they did really well over the summer. So overall, just on top of my head, I believe it was 81% survival. And we're really looking forward to see how they'll survive over the winter. But for this summer season, it was really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Martin, you have some comments?
Also in response to Murray, there is an assisted migration trial that was set up with South Nation and the Forestry and Conservation Association back in 2014, and I don't think we've really had much of a look at it the last few years. I know they're very interested in engaging us more on that trial, and I suspect they would appreciate the opportunity to either come and talk to this group or just talk to South Nation about what's going on. It's a lot of money, I guess, went into that trial. So they'll just put that something we should probably be talking about.
And I believe, Pat, that is the one you're referring to in Upper Plantagenet.
That's correct.
Yeah, and there's really been very little done there in terms of mowing, brush cutting, assessments the last few years, and it's something we should be spending more time with. So I know Gary Nielsen of the FGCA would like to talk to us about that. So maybe we can put that in notes, Rhonda.
Yeah, so as Pat mentioned, we will bring back some additional information at a future meeting for survival on that site.
Chris? Thanks, Martin. Chris, do you have some comments?
Oh, you muted yourself. Oh, there we go.
Sorry. We did have a conversation with Gary, and the problem was we didn't have the funding or the manpower to do that on a regular basis, and they said they would look to see what they could come up with, but he's never gotten back to us on that. So that's where it sort of sits, and we do mowing usually at least once a year, I believe. We've been doing it, and Mike's been doing it for us. So maybe we didn't get it done this year, but last year and the year before we did do it, I think twice.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just to clarify, the last time it was mowed was 2016. I just checked. So just so you know, it needs attention.
Thank you. No one else? We'll move to upcoming events, number 11.
So I didn't have any of note, but I did want to leave it on the agenda in case there are any members whose organizations have anything they'd like to share as far as upcoming for our March meeting.
No one with upcoming events? I might mention at this point too that the International Plowing to North Grenville next year, and they're busy now forming their committees and looking for volunteers, looking for all kinds of assistance. I'm sure that South Nation will be heavily involved with that and groups around.
Mr. Chair, it's Bill. This is sort of an upcoming event. I'm hopeful that next year we'll be able to meet in person much more regularly, and the rules and everything changes for us with this COVID situation, because I sure like the opportunity to be able to see people directly and interact that way. So that's just my hope for the future.
Anyone else with upcoming events? Seeing none. Date of next meeting. Rhonda?
And I'm not sure why the wrong slide up. So apologies. It's not the Fish and Wildlife Committee at 3. It is the Forestry Committee at 10 a.m. on the 3rd. And again, the joint meeting at 1 p.m. We will confirm that closer. So apologies, the slide is in error. So it is 10 a.m. as per your agenda package on the 3rd, which is a Thursday. And then we will confirm the joint meeting closer to that date at 1 p.m. At this point, the March meetings will be virtual. We're hoping, and we have budgeted hopefully for a hybrid approach in 2022. So we're hoping, as Bill said, at some point we can start meeting face to face. We may be able to do that in an outdoor setting this summer, but for March, for sure, we'll still be virtual.
We'll definitely be inside. Okay. Seeing none, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out today, and thanks to the staff and all the work that you've done over this last year. You've certainly been busy. My congratulations, Chris, for all the work that you did in getting the Healing Center circle, the organization that you were involved with there. Excellent work, and I look forward to the information coming out from the from Kayla, and so that we'll be able to spread that word around. And it is Christmas time. We won't meet again. I guess Christmas is in about 25 days. Rhonda, you ready?
No.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'm looking for a mover to adjourn. Doug? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Good Christmas to all.
Oh.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.